This week, the name
There
on the
he is.
marquee has got to be Aljamain Sterling, who this past weekend at UFC 288 defeated Henry Cejudo by a split decision in doing so, defending his bantamweight championship. The scorecards read 48-47, 48-47 for Aljo. Cejudo getting his own 48-47 mark. Let me throw it over to you first. What was your take on the scores? Who did you see winning the fight? And what is your take on the fight overall?
What a great job done by Mr. Aljamain Sterling. I am honestly glad that I've come around to be Team Aljo over the past couple of years because there's something fun about rooting for a guy who just keeps winning that everyone else seems to doubt and hate on no matter what. I like being on the other side. But he won that fight, man. Like, yes, there were two very close rounds. Aljo won 1-4. Henry won 5. We're not debating any of those. But 2 and 3 were close, and I get that. If you want to score this fight for Cejudo, you can probably go through rounds 2 and 3 and point out things you like more that he did than things Aljo did, and you can get a 48-47 out of it for Cejudo. But you can just as easily do that same thing and say Aljo won all of the first 4 rounds of that fight and scored 49-46 for Aljo. So, and for reference on MMA decisions, for what it's worth, 53% had it for Aljo. The majority had it for Aljo. 43% had it for Cejudo, and that's of the people. The real kicker is of the 23 experts listed on MMA decisions, 21 scored the fight for Aljo. And backing up the point I just made, there were more who scored it 49-46 for Aljo than who scored it for Henry at all. So he won that fight. He didn't blow our minds. He didn't continually backpack Cejudo or choke him out or anything like that. But he fought well. He used his length in ways that we weren't 100% sure he was going to be able to do. He kept Henry outside. He matched him with the wrestling in every moment, which was really impressive, even outdid him at numerous times. And Henry just couldn't figure it out, which I feel like was the main point of the whole fight. It was pretty disappointing to me to see how little he managed to get inside and let his hands go. Aljo was really keeping him on the outside. He was keeping him guessing with the awkwardness and the variety. He was ripping the leg. Whenever they closed the distance and they were in the clinch, it was Aljo who was being sure to score points there, little knees, body punches, things like that. Henry just wasn't doing enough to take these rounds, and I kept waiting for him to adjust. He's got this mind for the game, and I kept thinking, oh, he's going to figure out a way to deal with this, figure out a way to deal with that. And he really didn't. I thought he looked a little human in that fight, honestly, for a guy that people throw into a lot of GOAT conversations. I thought Aljo had a great game plan. He stuck to it, and I do think he absolutely earned that W. So Henry's dreams of being triple champ are going to have to be put on hold, at least for now. And Aljo really puts himself into the conversation of greatest bantamweight ever.
Yeah, he does. Omar, bringing you in here now, who did you score as the winner of that fight, and what were your impressions of the fight overall?
So I thought that fight was a close one. I think watching the fight, it was one of those situations where I think you knew the scorecards were going to be a mess. But if we're being honest, man, I had Aljo winning that fight 4-1, personally. I had him winning 1, 2, 3, and 4, and
Same.
Cejudo definitely took the 5th round. A lot of people have, scored Cejudo winning that 2nd round, even more so the 3rd round. I just, in neither one of those rounds did I feel like the momentum was ever really Cejudo's. Cejudo had moments in those rounds, but I feel like it was always Aljamain with the momentum, with the real threats in his approach, in his attack, in his control. Never really felt like Henry was threatening him in almost any situation. The striking I thought was really odd too. I thought Henry would be able to adjust to the length, but the karate style that he has doesn't work if you're that far away from a dude.
Yep.
Like he's fighting like if he has all of this length and he's like a T-Rex in there. So I don't really know why that part wasn't really adjusted at all. I don't even think it was sooner. It wasn't really adjusted to at all. You factor in the fact that Aljamain is a very odd, very quirky fighter in how he approaches the game, but Henry had a lot on his plate to deal with, and it was definitely a chess match for a good majority of it, but I really do think that Aljo won a majority of that fight, definitely dropped the 5th round for sure. I don't think that that's a debate at all, but I had him winning off the first 4 rounds.
Well, with this win, Aljamain Sterling now has notched his 9th consecutive win and what is, I believe, his 3rd consecutive title defense. I saw either one of us shared this around, or I saw this myself, that he now is tied with Khabib in terms of number of title defenses or something like that. Yeah. And so he's getting up there already in kind of a sneaky way.
Did you score for him, Mike?
I sure did. Yeah.
Okay. I couldn't remember. I'm sure we talked about it. I couldn't remember.
Yeah. I didn't have an eye for scoring, but I had a sense of the fight the whole time. I was like, I think Aljo is, kind of running away with it on the scorecards.
Yeah, I liked Omar's point of that. It never felt like Henry was in control at any point, really, until the 5th. It always felt like it was Aljo's fight.
Yeah, it did not feel like a Henry Cejudo fight, man, because Cejudo, in so many of his fights, against Cruz, against TJ, when he beat DJ, it felt like he had found a new level, and he was kind of always in control.
Yeah.
I will concede that the way that they're playing, and I hope they change the rules at some point. I mean, it's probably a fat chance, but the way that people are taking advantage of not getting struck when they're on bottom and trying to stall essentially a position, people are giving Aljamain shit for basically being on all fours and sort of bobbing his head left and right and kind of trying to avoid shots that way and things like that. And there's an argument to be made that there's some stalling tactics there and things like that, but that's not something that Aljamain made up. The Diaz brothers have been doing that shit since Japan. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Also, people are making such a big deal of it because of Henry's tweet about it. If you rewatch that fight, it happened twice, and the first time when Aljo was doing the weaving, he was weaving and backing up before Henry could have even hit him if he wanted to. So there was literally one instance where Henry could have kneed him or something. One time.
But you could see the hesitation from Henry, I think, across the board in a lot of the situations that he was in, not even just those. You know what I mean? I think that's...
The headlock situations, I mean, they're on the ground.
Yeah, and Henry... One of the big differences, and I don't know if we really went too deep into it last week, but it was to me evident this past weekend, was we saw 2 wrestlers go at it and try to compete against each other's wrestling and see who had the better of the other. But we only really saw one grappler in there. And I say that to say that Aljamain Sterling, while he is a D3 wrestler and he has that under his belt, the kid is also a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. And where Henry was very, very uncomfortable being with his shoulders on the ground, Aljo immediately went to butterfly guard, immediately nullified any kind of attacks that Cejudo was generally gonna throw in those positions, and then next thing you know, the motherfucker's right back up too. So I think it was a completely different game because you could see that there was uncomfort in certain areas where Sterling probably thrives being on the bottom as a wrestler just as much as he does being on top. And we don't really see a lot of that stuff when it comes to high-level wrestlers. It's usually either one or the other. We've seen John Jones fuck around with that every now and again when he's pulling guard or doing some weird unorthodox nonsense, but that's kind of what makes it unorthodox, is we don't expect a man who is strong in top game to look for a bottom position. But Sterling works well from it, and I think it threw Henry off a lot.
And Aljamain is strong as fuck, which doesn't get mentioned enough.
He's huge
when you see instances of Henry with his arms around him, with the wrestling pedigree he has, with his weight on Aljo, and Aljo still getting a knee up and then getting a leg up and push, he's just a strong motherfucker.
Yeah. And
the size mattered. The size mattered.
It was super evident. It's super evident. And I think it's crazy to think that Volkanovski might be a better matchup in the sense that they're a little bit similar in height. The fight style, I think, probably works a little bit better with Henry Cejudo's fight style. But Aljamain Sterling was stylistically a nightmare for Cejudo as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, it was tough. It was tough. Man. Sorry, Mike, we detoured you there.
No, it's fine. Let's talk about where these two gentlemen go from here. In terms of the title picture, we have a pretty good sense with the face-off that happened in the cage immediately after the fight between Aljamain Sterling and Sean O'Malley, with early contender for one of my memories of the year is when Merab Dvalishvili kind of secretly took Sean O'Malley's coat when he took it off, his jacket. He had this like red leather Michael Jackson style jacket. He takes it off for the stare down because he had no shirt on, and he had no idea that Merab is the one who like took it from him, and Merab puts it on, and then he's like basically standing between them. Freaking hilarious.
It's incredible. And the jacket was on in 3 seconds on Merab, and he's just perfectly situated in the middle of the camera.
And then Merab
has
gets
a
out of the
gift
cage
for always being in the dead center of the camera. Have you noticed this?
Who?
Like every backstage clip of Aljo, anytime where you see Aljo talking to his opponents or run-in with opponents, anything, the dead center of the camera is always Merab. Like, he's always fucking there.
Dude, I have never seen a man more excited to be in the middle of bullshit than Merab.
Oh yeah, he loves it. He does.
Merab fucking loves it. It's hilarious. He's so
I'll tell you
much
what,
fun, that
though,
guy.
they got to be careful with the way they bring these people in the cage because
Terrible idea.
they brought him in behind Aljo. Aljo doesn't know where he is. He comes in. I couldn't tell if he actually bumped Aljo's shoulder or not. It seemed like he did bump it a little bit, and he's like saying something in Aljo's ear. Like that kind of shit when you don't know a dude is right behind you and it's a dude you're about to fight. Like that's a risky little situation.
Yeah,
There's easily some type of guys who could end up getting physical right away with someone behind them like that.
Play that shit with Vanderlei Silva. See if somebody doesn't end up in the fucking
Yeah,
hospital.
man. You got to bring a guy in when it's very visible to the guy. You know, you can't take those kind of risks.
Yeah, I mean Dana White acknowledged that it wasn't their best decision, but it also sounds like it was something that they had planned long before that moment. That was not in the spur of a moment kind of thing.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah, they told Sean long before that he was going to get in that cage, ideally. Right. So, yeah, not the smoothest move, really. That could have really went left. It's a good thing Aljo is like a chill guy because Mark's right. That could have definitely gone to the cops for sure.
Yeah, man. So
But
you guys
like
think
it's going to be
pretty
August
much
or September? So
a done deal, foregone conclusion of O'Malley versus Sterling?
Yep.
Matter of fact, for the listeners, if you want to know how something like that can go left, you can Google, because it has been, I guess, a decade now at this point. You can Google Jason Mayhem and Jake Shields Strikeforce Brawl. Have a ball with that one. That is the reason you don't do what they did this weekend without planning it accordingly, because fuck. That's as bad as it gets, guys.
I mean, that was the Diaz's, man. It's like...
But it wasn't though. That's the crazy thing, right? It was Jake Shields. Jake Shields had won the fight,
but that was
and then Mayhem came in,
right,
and then they all lost their mind. But that's my point, and I think that's Mark's point too. This was Aljamain, sure, but it seems like you're putting a lot on the assumption that these guys won't lose their fucking mind. Look, even Khabib had his breaking point. Khabib done goddamn somersaulted off the fucking cage and tried to eagle kick this kid in the face.
Yep.
You just never know, man. You never know.
Okay, let's talk about Triple C, Henry Cejudo. Where does he go from here, Mark?
It's definitely a lot more up in the air. If I had a guess, I think we're going to get Henry and Merab. I feel bad for Corey Sandhagen because I really thought that he deserved that Merab fight and still deserves that Merab fight. But I've been watching the UFC long enough to know how Dana's mind works, and seeing Henry throw out this idea of him and Merab saying he's down, I really think that's what we're going to get. It just, I don't know, it feels like a perfect fight.
Omar?
I mean, yeah, there's too much going on at the top of this division for us to really play any other game other than what's available to us. And the fact is, O'Malley's got Sterling next, and Henry is calling for Merab. No one is calling for Merab. So,
well, Sandhagen is.
Oh, I guess, but he's also not fighting Sterling like ever. So
remind me, what was Sandhagen's his like canned line?
Something and it don't taste good.
He's
I
like,
got something for you and it don't taste good.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just feel like it's Henry because Henry is such a name
Yeah.
that it's if you go Henry Marab, you can figure out something for Sandhagen to do. If you go Sandhagen Marab, it's harder to get Henry to say yes to something else. You know what I mean? I almost feel like you have to give Henry what he's asking for.
Yeah. Well, if it doesn't sting even more for Sandhagen, Henry Cejudo has been officially ranked in the UFC rankings at number 3, above Sandhagen.
I mean, I feel like he should be number 1, to be quite honest, with his resume.
I'm trying to... Really? Even after the loss?
I mean, who's he behind? Like, Marab is better than Cejudo, career resume-wise right now? Certainly not.
The motherfucker's been gone for 3 years.
I guess the 3 years. That's fair enough. He shouldn't be behind O'Malley.
Why? Because you don't care for O'Malley? O'Malley's done work, dude.
I root for O'Malley. What are you talking about?
But against, like, if you put O'Malley next to Cejudo, there's an immediate, like no way. But O'Malley's
Cejudo has
work
earned a
against-
higher ranking than O'Malley. In
Even
my
with the
opinion.
3-year layoff? I mean, O'Malley's done work, dude. He fought
He's a
fucking
former
Peter
champion.
Yan.
He beat Dillashaw. Like, O'Malley did what? He has beaten one good fighter in his life.
I just feel like if
And he barely
Cejudo
did
came
it.
back and actually won, maybe, well, he'd be champion, obviously. But I don't know.
I mean, I
don't
get
know.
it. I get it. The inactivity, you slot him in somewhere. But
And
like,
not to
let's
mention, it's
let's
the
not
inactivity,
forget-
but it's also the performance, too. Like, I don't think he was particularly amazing on Saturday, if we want to be completely honest.
No, I agree. But let's not, just because O'Malley got ranked super high these days, let's not forget that he has beaten one legit fighter, and a lot of people thought he didn't do it. I did score it for him, but, like, it's all he has on his whole resume.
All right. Dude, good for the UFC for it working out with Sean O'Malley, man. He's like one of their biggest stars going back to when he was unranked. He like
Oh, dude, if he somehow fucking clips Aljo and becomes champ, it's going to be a big fucking deal.
I
They're gonna be
definitely can't pick.
so behind him.
I definitely can't pick O'Malley versus Aljo. That's
No,
that's
God,
another
no, me
that's
neither.
another matchup that seems tailor made for Aljo and a nightmare for O'Malley.
Agree. Brutal matchup.
Yeah, man. I have grown to be rooting for. I find myself rooting for Sean O'Malley quite a bit.
I'm a fan. I like the kid. I think he's fun, and the way he fights is
exciting.
super exciting.
Yeah, man.
100%.